going on. My body was just in complete shock. I was covered from head to toe in what looked like third-degree burns. So it's been, at that point, my parents were starting to get worried. They wanted to take me to the hospital, but they were afraid because they knew that they'll just put me on steroids again. And as soon as they were going to take me, when it got really severe, they somehow I snapped out of it and I cracked a joke or something. And they were like, wow, my little girl is still in there. So we just decided to continue.
Hey guys, what's up? Bree here, the creator of Preventable, the documentary, and you are watching Where Are They Now? And we are with the amazing Nina, who I am like shocked. Like, you look gorgeous.
Thank
This
you.
this hair, like from the documentary, it's like looking at two different people. It's incredible.
It's a little bit intense for me too, to be honest. It's like been a whole I talked about it in the documentary where I couldn't recognize myself in the mirror when I was going through TSW. Now I can't recognize myself in the mirror because I look better. So it's like in a good way.
But like even this hairstyle, like y'all, when she came on to the Zoom, I was like, what? Who is this person? Like the earrings and everything. Like
Hey, it feels so good just to be able to put on earrings and like mascara and not, be freaking out about it. So I take what I can get.
yeah, man. Like honestly, just love it. Like so good. Um, well, it's been since the summer of 2017 that we've seen each other, which is pretty crazy. It feels like forever ago and it doesn't feel like forever ago. Like it's a mixture
Yep.
of in between that. But how long, like where are you in your journey? How many years?
It's going to be 7 years in June
7
this
years.
year. So that's like really insane to say, honestly. I never thought I would be saying that.
Yeah.
Partially because I, first of all, didn't think it would take this long. And second of all, because I didn't think I would even survive at some points, to be honest. So I've been like the past year and a half, I've been kind of in a perpetual state of shock that I'm still even standing. Like I wake up and I'm just like, I'm still here. It's surreal.
Well, I mean, even back then during Preventable, I know that was so difficult for you. And I'm so grateful to this day that you allowed me into like the comfort of your home to sit and talk with you in the state that you were in.
Yeah, I was in a pretty dark place then. And I think it just got even darker after that, filming, up until, like a year and a half ago or something like that. So I went through a pretty dark period of time there.
I mean, like even I remember you like vividly talking about getting into like a bath, how excruciating that is, how traumatizing that is. Has any of that changed, or is that something that still sits with you?
Um, Physically, it's not as bad anymore, not nearly as bad. Although I will say I have not taken a bath in like 2 years because it's become like a post-traumatic stress disorder type situation that I don't like to bathe. So I usually take showers. Um, but even with showers, it's more of a mental thing that I still struggle with taking a shower regularly. Um, I still get like flare ups and it'll burn a little bit, but nothing like it used to be. It's more of a mental and emotional type of thing. It's just my body literally reacting every single time I'm about to shower, and I have this crazy anxiety, and it's like a battle every time. So
Yeah.
it's crazy how much that sticks with you.
Yeah, and I mean, I was talking to one of the other, um, girls that I had interviewed to Preventable, and she kinda says the same thing of after a while, like, being so far in, you're 7 years almost, I'm 6 years, and when you're so far in and you're still having to deal with some of these symptoms, you're just exhausted, like, the physical pain of it is completely trumped by your, like, sheer exhaustion of trying to figure out comfort measures, trying to figure out how you're still trudging through all of
Yeah,
this.
it is. I think it's like a weird kind of double-edged sword. It's like the longevity is in some ways it does get easier. You know, I don't want people to think like, oh, it's a nightmare the whole time, and because it's really not. I've had some amazing moments and periods since the filming, but the longevity is like, it, oh my god, like you just get tired. And I notice for personally myself, the mental and emotional aspect is huge. I mean, like I constantly have to battle that. It's like my subconscious is after almost 7 years, it's almost kind of like you get used to it. And in a weird way, even though it sounds so weird to some people, maybe, and I didn't even realize it until years in. It's like you get kind of comfortable in the pain because everything, like the good stuff, becomes unknown to you. It's like that uncertainty. It's because you're in such darkness and misery for so many years, it becomes comfortable, and it's not a conscious thing. It's more subconscious that it's happening. But I've become aware of that within my own journey, and it's just insane how the brain works in that aspect. It's like you get scared. You start to get scared of being like happy
Yeah.
and doing good, because then it can get bad, and it's insane.
No, I even said that, with one of the girls. I was like, "I feel like I'm this Charlie Brown effect where if I say that I'm happy about something,
Yeah,
something's gonna go wrong."
yeah, it's
Like
like you're kind of always like waiting for the other shoe to drop.
exactly.
And it's honestly, even when you're doing well and your skin clears up, it still stays kind of a thing, and I think we all, I know I did. I had this kind of perception of like, when my skin gets better, I'm gonna be like awesome. Everything's gonna just get better. But then you realize it's like even when your skin gets better, you have all this mental and emotional stuff to deal with, and that can be an even longer road, I think,
Yeah.
because it's your mind is such a powerful thing and powerful tool, and there's so much inner work to do there, and like just so much work. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
It's like the
So it
residue
doesn't
that's left
really just
over.
end when your skin gets better.
Yeah.
It's kind of an ongoing process.
Well, I mean, since the documentary, obviously there's been a lot of different stuff that's happened with you in your life. Because I know at some point you were working, correct? Um,
Yeah.
you were working from home or from an office?
um, I worked from home at first, and then I worked from an office for like a year.
And, like, what mentally prepared you to start doing that? Like, were you kind of, like, up on the mend? Were you taking anything to help? Like, what was that?
um yeah, so that was right after the documentary. I think the next year, no, beginning of 2019, I started using TCM, so traditional Chinese medicine, for anyone that doesn't know the abbreviation. Um, and I do still use it to this day, and it honestly just like transformed my entire life. Like I don't think I fully have words to actually explain that, but I'll do my best. But basically, that's kind of what set it off, and my skin was still struggling. But I actually also worked with some life coaches and did a lot of kind of mental and inner healing, and that's what actually prepared me to go back to work full time at at the office and like get myself out there. So my skin still wasn't like perfect by any means. I was still, on and off flaring. But it gave me this like mental shift in perspective where it was like, I can't just sit here and wait for life to come to me. I have to go out there and fight for it. Which is really, it's difficult to do after that many years. You're like, it's like starting over. But it had, there was definitely a lot of beauty in it too. And I experienced, things I haven't in my whole lifetime. So it's been an up and down journey, as TSW can be and usually is, but I've had, a pretty long period of time too, where I felt pretty good and was really stable with my skin. So, that's kind of the gist of some of it. It's like so much has happened. It's hard to kind of like, wrap it all up.
During COVID, did you end up having to work from home? Did you stop working? Like, did anything inhibit you during last year?
I worked from home for like maybe a month, I think. And then I went back to the office after that. And then my skin was doing awesome at the time. I felt better than ever. Like I was riding this super high wave for like all of last year. And I actually, when COVID happened, my birthday, my 30th birthday was the next month in April. And I had this like weird, I felt so good, but I had this weird like survivor's guilt almost, because I was like, oh my God, like I'm feeling awesome, but like the whole world is like not. And I want to go out there and like do things and live my life, but now the whole world is pretty much shut down.
Yeah.
So it was like a really weird, I'm like, I'm always doing things backwards type of feeling. So it did, I think it impacted me more than I realized too in some ways, subconsciously, because I've had, obviously we go through isolation as during, TSW, and I also went through a lot of isolation in my childhood. So, but I didn't realize at the time that it was actually affecting me that much until a few months later.
Is there, I mean, obviously you're in a much better mental state than you were from the documentary. Was there things like that their life coaches said or did that helped gain a bit more confidence, like going out into the world?
Yeah, I mean, it was, what I did with them was mostly, it's called NLP, so it's neuro linguistic programming, which is a fascinating topic if anyone's interested in looking into it. And I wish I had the chance to kind of continue it, but it really kind of rewires your subconscious mind and it works on all the trauma and things that way. So that kind of really was what gave me like the initial push to do it. And then it was a huge adjustment period, going back to work and like going out and but to be honest, it was like, to me, I felt like a little kid that was like reborn again and like looking at the world through different eyes. And I was like so curious about all these different things because I lost most of my faith in life and most of the will and passion, through TSW. And then when I started actually living again, I was like, oh my God, like life is just so different. And you're different too, honestly. It's like changing is inevitable, like during this process. So it was actually a really emotional and really like enriching experience for me. That was like, I've never experienced pure happiness and peace until probably last year, honestly, in my entire life.
Oh my gosh, that's so
So
awesome.
that's huge.
That is huge. Like seriously, like you have been through so much. Like even before TSW, like your history with like steroid use and stuff like that and the low points were even before TSW, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I had TSW realistically like 4 or 5 years before I actually started it. So technically, you can put my journey at like over 10 years. But because like topical steroids just stopped working, and I was constantly covered in those severe like third degree looking type of rashes. So and I had a really rough childhood too. I mean, not to get into that too much, but I was born into a war zone, basically literal, in former Yugoslavia. So I've my journey has been really crazy and
Yeah.
intense.
You've
So
had,
it definitely been longer than just TSW.
yeah, so you've like, I'm actually reading this book right now, called The Body Keeps the Score. And I just
Yeah,
find it really interesting, like perhaps some of
that is
us
a really good
are,
book.
yeah, like perhaps some of us are holding on to some sort of trauma in our lives that are is keeping us from our actual life. Um,
I think so. I'm really convinced that like the emotional and mental component of TSW or any like disease is bigger than people really realize. So we've all had some kind of journey prior to TSW, and we got like eczema or whatever it is for a reason, right? So I think there's a lot more there than a lot of people realize, and I didn't realize it for like the first few years of TSW either. But now I'm seeing how it all really connects. Um, to even like my trauma before using steroids. So it's kind of like all an interconnected thing. And I think we just need to work on the whole organism as a whole. And that includes the mind, because the mind is so powerful. So that's been like one of my main things is I know that stress is my biggest trigger. Hands down, that's the only thing that I've noticed that makes it worse and a lot worse. So for me, that's been like the number one thing is figuring out how to rewire those kind of systems and programs in my own mind, really. Because at some point you become like a prisoner of your own mind when you've been, especially when you've been through severe trauma. But a lot of things are trauma. I'm not saying mine is like
yeah.
bigger than other people's. It's like we all have some kind. And I think it's really important to get to that root, and it's something that's not really talked about that much, especially in our community. I mean, there are some people, but I think it's a huge component.
Well, yeah, what is it like 60% or something, some form of like the serotonin, or a good portion of the serotonin that you create is actually created in your gut, I
Your
believe.
gut, yeah,
And so to sit there and really think like your body and your mind and your like system within are all working together. And when
right.
people forget that your mind is a huge part of that, like that's a huge component that we should be focusing on.
It is. I mean, for me personally, like I like you say, like serotonin is made in the gut, and when I was in my childhood during the war, I was severely malnourished, and I weighed like 9 pounds at 4 years old. So that's like newborn babies. So that's when I started having digestion issues. And the doctors then told me that like I would never have normal digestion or like a flat stomach or anything, because my bowels and everything was so damaged from the malnutrition at such a young age. So that even though that was like way before the steroids, it ties into the whole picture of my healing, because then at 17 I was suddenly like diagnosed with depression and put on like antidepressants and all these things. So it's like I think it's a much more complex thing than we realize.
Yeah, I mean, we're all like snowflakes. Like I try and equate, like we're all different. Our bodies all need something else. Like mine needs something different than yours
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
your healing journey. Um, so I guess like I wanted to end on the note of like, is there any advice you would give to someone going through TSW right now?
It's a really, really hard question. Um, I mean, like most people, it's like you'll just say, right, be patient with yourself, like take care of yourself and things like that. If I want to get into it a little bit deeper as somebody that's been going through it for 7 years, I used to say that, time just heals, and that was kind of my belief. But I think after like the 4 year mark, I started to kind of question that. Um, and in my personal experience, I don't think time would have been enough. So for me personally, obviously, what worked was TCM. That's not going to work for everyone. Um, but at some point, we have to start questioning, like, what else? What can we do? Is there anything that we can do to help our bodies? Because some are just so damaged from all of that poison that we were putting in that it's unbelievable. And so I think that's like one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and the other one is really the emotional and mental aspect. Treat your mental health just like you do your physical. Like that's I didn't really do that much, in the first few years. And I really couldn't because I was in so much pain, really
Mhm.
honestly. Um, but it's such an important component, and I completely noticed that with me it makes a huge difference. So it's like I have to do certain things now, like yoga and meditating and going out in nature. Like those are my kind of like medication now, instead of like taking a pill or cream. um so then I do a lot of therapy too. To be honest, it's like I feel like I'm gonna have like a lifetime of therapy ahead of me. um but that's really all you can do, is like just take it easy on yourself and realize that it's a process and it's not going to happen overnight. It's just not.
And I think that's great because, like, even at 6 years, and I think it was kind of like around my 4 year mark of like, is this just me like sitting here waiting to get better, like enough? Because especially like now I'm reading into all this stuff, and especially during COVID, where some stress levels can be really high, and you have all this stuff that's like waiting through your mind about what's going to be happening this next year or two. And I find stress to be triggering. I find that some days are better than others, and I don't know why. And i I'm reading this book now, and how the mind deals with your body, and I'm like, there has to be some sort of work, especially at this far along, that possibly I should be doing to help my body, because maybe she's like really struggling and I'm just ignoring her.
Right. It's that like mind body connection, right? And that book talks about that too. It's not an easy task. And for me personally, as someone who for years was like so immersed and involved in the TSW community and advocacy, one thing I noticed is you kind of lose yourself, um, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in the end, but it's like TSW becomes kind of like your entire identity, which is obviously not going to be good in the long run. So it's like when you're doing this advocacy, even though it's great and you're connecting with people and finding support, it kind of just becomes like, for me, as having like being in like Daily Mail and like having people saying, having one of like the worst cases, even though they're all obviously bad, it was like I became like that girl that with the bad skin that
Yeah.
was isolated in her home, and then I didn't know who I was without that. So it's like you get, even though it's you're in so much pain, you get attached to that because it
Yeah.
becomes your life, really. So that's like the other thing that, for especially long-term sufferers, it's like take care of yourself, to step back from that world. Like last year, I stepped back for like almost a year from social media and like everything, because I just needed to get away and not be so immersed in it, because your subconscious mind is constantly picking up on everything that you're looking at, and everything that you're reading. So that's a really tough one to break from.
I've even debated, because I know I kind of took a step back, and that's why I kind of wanted to do this series just to catch up with everybody and feel like I was still helping in a sense with the community, like to not completely leave. But I made a very conscious decision, like when I was creating my Instagram, that my one for Preventable was for my TSW skin stuff. Like that's where I'll share. Like right now, I'm kind of going through a time with my skin, and that's where I share my journey. When it comes to my personal Instagram, like I wanted to make sure I had two very clear cut things that I didn't want to let TSW become my life. Like I didn't want
Yeah,
that to be how people identified with me. Um, and so I have my personal account that's private. That's I'm with family, I'm with friends. Every once in a blue moon, I'll post something about my skin, like to do with a documentary or my 1 year, 2 year, 3 year anniversary, like that. But it's never like any graphic photos or anything like that, because that's not what I wanted my life to revolve around, because I knew how easy it was to get severely sucked in after a while. So I think
yeah.
that's great advice of like try not to let that become your identity.
Right.
Um,
I mean, I pretty much did, honestly, for some time. Like that was like my entire life. And I didn't really have any other choice, because I was bedridden, and just literally all I had was my phone and internet, right? So it's like that's your only connection to the world. But after that, it's super hard to break out of that, because it becomes like an attachment sort of thing. And it's important to create those boundaries like you did. And when you think about it, it's really reflective of us too, because your skin is kind of like your boundary, from your barrier and boundary from the outside world, right? So it's like if you're not creating those, it'll end up reflecting, on your skin too. So it's all kind of like a mirror of what's going on the inside. um, and while it's awesome to like advocate, and I'm so grateful that there's so many people now doing it. Like when I started TSW, it was I think it was only like a few hundred of us,
yeah.
and now it's like thousands. So it's awesome to see people sharing their story, but it to some extent it kind of worries me, because I don't want people to think that that's all there is to them. Because you're so much more than your flare, and you're so much more than TSW, and sometimes it takes time to find that person, because you change so much, but it can be an exciting process, actually.
I mean, I'm still on that journey, and I still have to give myself reminders about that. Like this is my journey. It's very different than what I was doing before. I was a performer and stuff like that. Like I may never go back to being on a stage full time working for something because of my skin at the moment. And it's kind of an exploration of your new self of
It is, but it's also, you also have to kind of allow yourself to grieve over the life that you had or thought you were going to have, and even like the person that you were, right? Like so it's a constant kind of like grieving process through TSW too. I mean, not in the sense that you lose someone, but you really do lose so much. And I think you have to kind of allow yourself to feel that, because more than likely your life won't be the same after it.
no.
Like mine's not at all, and it's not what I pictured it to be ever. Like I never thought I would be doing this for 7 years, and I've changed a lot as a person in general. Mostly in a good way, to be honest. This has like taught me to how strong like forgiveness is in general, and I used to be like a really angry person, and bitter, and kind of dark. So it's like this really changed a lot of things within me that are actually pretty amazing, you know. But that's one of the things, is like letting go of the expectation of being the same person that you were, because you probably won't be.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I completely agree with you 100%. And I mean, I keep staring at you like in awe of like, this is Nina. I'm talking to Nina, right? Like,
It's kind of crazy. I'm like, you know, the practitioner that I work with, Olivia, she's pretty known in the community now.
yeah,
But she like posted my story on her website too, and people keep emailing her, and they're like, are you sure like that's the same person? Just from like my before and after pictures. And it's that's the other part, you know, like going back to what I was talking about, the identity thing. It's super strange to see your body change that much, even when it's for the better, because then you got to learn
like
who this is.
rewire.
It's like
Yeah. I feel like,
it's really a strange thing, and it's hard to describe in words. But you know, most people that are going through this can feel that, I think.
yeah. Like it's almost funny, like, you have like chapters of your life. And I almost feel like this is like a new book. Like this is like a
Pretty
completely
much.
new novella that's happening.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a completely like rebirth process, and that's not a bad thing. It's just it can be overwhelming and intense, you know. Most of the time it is, but
but
it does get better, you know. I think if anything, you know, what my journey has shown me is that it's possible, and I kind of feel like if I can heal, anyone can, because I mean, I was looking at my little like segment from the documentary earlier today, and I'm like, that's me. Like, it's crazy.
no.
So I always just want to say, like, you know, if there's hope for me, there's hope for everyone.
No, amen, girl. And like, again, I can't thank you enough for allowing me into your home and the physical and mental state that you were in. Like, I I wanted to show that, like, if I could have myself in that moment, but I was farther along in that process. And you, again, like, you were that one girl that was just like in such immense suffering. Like, I remember just feeling like in awe of how you were like able to keep going in the state that you were in. And then to allow me into your home, I was like, this girl is legit. Like, she is so awesome.
I was super nervous about it, as you know. Um, but you know, it's just one of those things where it's like, um, I literally couldn't say no to that, because I had to show people too. So, you know, I wanted to show that, and really it feels sort of like it was a lifetime ago, um, but not at the same time. But just the amount of change that's happened since then is just like insane, you know. And being kind of that girl is like not easy, you know. I was like the one that like didn't recover of like everyone. But you know, here we are now, so it all kind of comes back full circle.
So awesome. I'm so glad I got to talk to you, girl. Oh my gosh.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And I'm so glad you're here. I mean, hopefully one day I would love to see everyone again. But if this is as close as we get, I'm super grateful for that.
Yeah, at least we get something, right? Hopefully we can all have like a huge TSW like meetup one day, like in Hawaii or something. I don't
Yeah,
know. And just like have a ton of TSW people there. That would be so awesome.
it would
I
be.
think we all deserve it too, you know, after this ridiculous amount of suffering.
No, for sure, for sure. Um, so thank you. I'm so glad to see you doing so much better than 2017.
Thank you.
Yeah, girl.
It's been a journey, but you know, I still have little like little flare ups, I'd call them, since you know it's nothing like it was. Um, but it's definitely gotten better. So I'm looking forward to seeing kind of like what life has in store for me now. like once you kind of get out of this, you're like, it's kind of like the world is your oyster. Like, you can do anything, even though you still kind of have to work on the mental aspect. But it'll be exciting to see where it leads.
Yeah,
So
girl. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, should I do like another 2 years from now? I should do this again so I can see where everybody
you could.
is. Everybody is.
Might not be a bad idea.
So we'll see, guys. Where are they now 2.0 may happen down the line. But thank you, girl. It's been a real treat to see you.
Well, thank you for all you've done. Seriously, you've been like one of the most massive warriors in the community, and everything you've done has seriously altered like the fate of TSW. So we all appreciate you. I think I speak for everyone when I say that.
Thank you, Nina. I wouldn't be able to do my work without voices like yours. So it goes
Hey,
full
it takes a
circle.
team, right?
It takes a team, it takes a village.
Yep.
So thank you,
Just keep
darling. All right, girl. Hopefully I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, girl.